Hi, my name's George. I've had the pleasure of working for Barney's Motorcycle Sales for 3 family generations now. I started in 1965 working under Ray and Beverly Hempstead, and it has been a pleasure ever since. I wish I had another 30 years I could stay. I'm the oldest employee of Barney's now, not just in age but longevity. I'm now the only working employee that ever knew Barney, who unfortunately passed away in 1970. But it has been a real joy. The way it all started for me at Barney's was I used to come out here with a lot of other high school kids after school and hang around and hung around this place. We just loved coming here. When I was growing up, my mother told me there's 3 places I don't want you going, and you're not allowed to go to bowling alleys, bus stations, and motorcycle shops. So the first 3 places I went as soon as I could was the bowling alley and the bus station and of course the motorcycle shops. I hung around here so much that when I was pumping gas after school on 4th Street at the Shell station, that's where Ray used to come in, the owner of Barney's, and get gas for his company vehicles. And I was always pumping gas into his vehicles, and one day he said, "I see you out at my store all the time. Would you like to have a job?" And he hired me to come out and go to work for Barney's. And I started from emptying trash cans to working on the beach rentals. Back in the old days, we used to rent the small motorcycles, and I worked on those, and then finally ended up going into sales because I failed at practically everything else. But one thing I could do was sell motorcycles. And Ray kept me on and trained me at his house. We sat at his kitchen table one night and he showed me how to do a bill of sale and figure the taxes and tag fees, etc. And ever since then I've been involved with sales and then went into the financing end of it. Barney was quite the kidder. He used to do all sorts of things. I remember one year I wanted to change my handlebars on my motorcycle, and being a kid and not too smart, I bought the bars and noticed none of my wiring for the controls would reach. My new handlebars were larger than the old ones. So I went to Barney and he said, "Oh, go get the wire stretchers." I didn't know much about mechanics, and I said, "What are wire stretchers?" He says, "They look like pliers, but they've got metal that goes rectangle, and you put the wire in it and you squeeze it and it squeezes the wires out." Well, that made a lot of sense to me back then. So he sent me to one of the mechanics, and of course as soon as I asked for wire stretchers, the mechanic knew what was going on, and he sent me to the other mechanic because he had given them to him, and then that mechanic naturally had loaned them to the other mechanic. And so I made a fool of myself in the entire service department, going to every mechanic there to find out that there was no such thing as wire stretchers, not knowing that the wires had extra cable pushed inside the headlight that all I had to simply do was pull it and it came out and everything worked fine. One day we were all working and we noticed smoke coming out of the old BSD department. It used to be a paint department at one time, and it was a separate small building right behind the main showroom, and smoke was coming out the windows indicating it was on fire. So there was a fire extinguisher on a pole, and I just panicked and grabbed it and I ripped it off the pole, tore the mounting hardware and everything off so it couldn't be put back up properly, and ran out there just to find out that there was a little paper burning in a trash can because Ray wanted to see if anyone knew where the fire extinguishers were. Well, I think it cost him a few dollars to get it repaired and put back on the pole. I did know where the fire extinguisher was at that time. In the earlier years, before I moved into the sales department, I worked with a man by the name of Clyde James. He was a great parts manager. He could remember every part number in his head. He was fantastic. And in those days, that's way before computers, and our parts inventory had to be done with pencil. So if you took a part out of the parts bin, you had to mark down -1 and it left, say, 8. And at the end of the day, if the mechanics didn't use all the parts that you sent down to the service department, they returned them. And you had to do the reverse. You had to put them back in parts department, and then you had to put +1 and bring the inventory back to where it's supposed to be. There was no air conditioning in the parts department, only in the small little office. So it was very, very hot in the summertime working in the parts department, and it was a pain to always have to put inventory back in inventory. And it would always happen about 4:30 in the afternoon, towards the end of the workday for the mechanics. And back in the old days, we had a hole in the floor with a bucket and a rope, and we would put the parts in the bucket and drop them through the hole in the floor to the mechanics. And they would ring a bell, and we'd go back and we'd pull the parts up and return them to their rightful spot. Well, in the afternoons when that would happen, and it's the hottest, we always griped about it, but every now and then Barney would surprise us. He'd ring the bell, I'd be crying and complaining, and I'd walk over there and I'd pull up that parts bucket thinking I've got to restock parts, and there'd be a cold Budweiser or two for Clyde and I. We loved that man.